We all know and have accepted within the Mandela effect community that technology seems to be far more advanced in this reality than our old one. So medical technology should be no exception, I guess. There are things that just did not exist in my old timeline. My research on this video began with an article about hand transplants, but there are other medical wonders that I feel are attached, no pun intended, to this particular ME. To quote a friend who originally posted this article as an ME in our Facebook group, the main reason people were paralyzed in my old reality is that once severed, nerves never repaired themselves, nor grew. Now this article says, and I quote, "But newly connected nerve fibers do not instantly carry current. The fibers in the recipient's arm must grow from the transplant's attachment points clear down into the new hand, at a rate of about an inch a month, to give the donated hands anything but the crudest sensations and movement control. This is totally new to me." We are talking about vascularized composite tissue allotransplantation, or otherwise known as VCA. Layman's terms, transplants. This procedure differs in two important ways from solid organ transplants. One, they involve multiple tissue types intricately tied together, and two, they don't extend life, they enhance it. Let me just point out what is wrong with this and why this is an example of the huge differences between what I call the Orion world and our old beloved Sagittarius world. 1. In this article, they talk about taking dangerous drugs for the rest of one's life. In our old Sagittarius world, it was known that anti-rejection drugs, or so-called immunosuppressant drugs for transplants, were only given during a certain time window, up till the point that it was sure the organ would no longer be rejected, but certainly not for the rest of their lives. And number 2, as already mentioned, in our old reality, nerves simply did not regenerate once severed. Now, peripheral nerves, meaning not the spinal ones, have the amazing ability to do so. The first ever successful hand transplant was performed in Lyon, France in 1998. In 1999, Warren Breidenbach became the first US surgeon to perform a VCA transplant when he gave a new left hand to Matt Scott, a 37-year-old who'd lost his to a firecracker. Hand transplant teams started to form in Innsbruck, Paris, Pittsburgh, Los Angeles, Boston, and other cities. In less than 2 decades, there were dozens. The operations are enormously complex, lasting 10 to 15 hours and requiring microsurgery to connect dozens of tendons, muscles, bones, nerves, and vessels, sometimes no bigger than vermicelli. The article also references Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine in Baltimore and plays a fairly significant role in this story. This university has also been subject to the Mandela effect, with many people remembering John Hopkins as opposed to Johns Hopkins. Johns Hopkins is just plain nonsensical, which is also a typical characteristic of many MEs. It's like, why? I would also like to highlight another point that was brought up in the article that I thought was inconsistent. For those of you who know my videos, you will know that certain inconsistencies or discrepancies pique my curiosity all the more and enhance my belief that I'm dealing with an ME. For me, it is a typical clue that the history for this particular fact has been altered from what I have always known to be true, and that it is not yet fully formed or developed. The article was written by David Dobbs, a published author and Nat Geo contributor, who interviewed the people connected to this story, including the doctors involved. In one interview with Dr. Andrew Lee, Dobbs asked what surprised him most about doing hand transplants, to which Lee replied, "It was the bond one forms with the patient." Quote, "You keep a lifelong close relationship with the patient. You get to know one another really well. You stay in close touch. You have their cell phone number. You text one another. It's a long-term and close relationship." When Dobbs confronted him about one patient who died in 2017, he asked Dr. Lee how he'd heard of her death, and Lee said through word of mouth. Then he offered, quote, "We really don't know the cause of death," unquote. In the article, the author expresses his surprise and thinks he misheard the doctor, so he questioned him further. Dr. Lee responded with, "Well, after her hand was removed, we did not follow her. But the last we heard, she was in good health." So let me get this straight. In one sentence, Lee says the long-term relationship is what surprised him the most. Then in another sentence, he confesses to not actually knowing how one of his patients had died because, and I quote, "we did not follow her." What happened to this long-term relationship thing that supposedly had a profound effect on the doctor? Well, it's either BS or ME. One of those acronyms fits the bill. Secondly, as you will see later in the video, the cause of death was indeed established and is linked to another major ME. Let me also just clarify something here. This is not a case of new technology being developed in order to help nerves regenerate. In this reality, nerves could always regenerate, just not all. But in my reality, no nerves could regenerate. Once they were severed, that was it. At this point, I have to say that I have had 2 stapedectomy procedures. I have an implant in both ears. One surgery I had done in 2007 and the second one in 2010. And it was explained to me prior to both surgeries that a potential rare complication of the stapedectomy is facial nerve injury leading to paralysis. Should this happen, there is nothing they can do. This was my reality. Now they're saying that the nerves in the face regenerate, and it has always been this way. If you Google this or whatever search engine you use, you will find that the information goes something like this. Unlike nerves of the spinal cord, the peripheral nerves that connect our limbs and organs to the central nervous system have an astonishing ability to regenerate themselves after injury. I must also point out that some of the people who commented on the post have a certain degree of medical knowledge, including one person who studied nursing. This is what she said after reading the following link. "This wasn't how it was explained in nursing school. They could splice large nerve fibers together, but essentially you would never be the same after an amputation. There was no regeneration. The body simply didn't do this on its own." On further research, I discovered that this type of nerve regeneration occurs mainly with hands, faces, and genitals. When I read this, it reminded me of something I posted in June of last year and coincides with what I believe to be another huge ME. It concerns female to male surgery, otherwise known as FTM. Bear with me here because this is also quite complex, and I shall try to simplify it as much as I can so as to fully express what I believe to be the ME here. Now, I've always been aware of a procedure called metoidioplasty, which is where a makeshift penis is created. The resulting penis is smaller than the average and its use is somewhat limited. This I've known for some years now. However, what is now in question for me at least is the appearance of another procedure, phalloplasty, where the end result is a fully functional penis. This procedure has apparently been around for many, many years. By the way, I'm hoping YouTube will not slap an age restriction on this video. They've done that to me before. So if they do, I will then re-upload the video accordingly with changes. Now, here's the thing. I also Googled when the first successful metoidioplasty procedure was performed, the makeshift version. And on the wiki page, there is no mention of when it was first performed, but the earliest date referenced on one of the articles at the foot of the page is 1986. So please tell me why they are performing this procedure when the other procedure has long been available. I mean, who wants a small dick that doesn't work properly, right? In 1779, a chance discovery leads to one of the earliest known instances of the operation. Some scholars, however, take issue with this being labelled as a gender reassignment. From a technical point of view, it's probably an exaggeration. And in the history of Western thought on gender and sexuality, it's out of place. The surgeon didn't believe he was changing or reassigning the patient's gender, just repairing it. Carl Baer underwent a female-to-male gender reassignment operation in Germany in 1906. Now, these dates are way off for me. This just wasn't happening in my timeline. It is quite possible that this operation was the metoidioplasty procedure, the makeshift one. There is nothing in the article that clarifies that, but even so, 1906? According to this article, Carl Baer became the first person in history to undergo a gender reassignment operation. The exact details of Baer's medical procedure were never found. Perhaps they were burned by the Nazis in 1933, along with other documents pertaining to this. Either way, the operation was a success. The first phalloplasty procedure for the purposes of gender reassignment was performed on trans man Michael Dillon in 1946 by Dr. Harold Gillis, which is documented in Pagan Kennedy's book, The First Man-Made Man. Now, just to clarify, I'm not talking about reconstruction or making something out of what already exists. I'm talking about complete gender reassignment. You know, we're building a pole here from nothing. Phalloplasty was also first successfully performed in 1959 in the Netherlands, which was shocking enough for me. The operative technique had already been described in 1938 and was perfected after World War II. By the 1970s, gender reassignment operations were fully accepted. Not in my friggin' timeline. In my timeline, only the metoidioplasty procedure was performed, not the phalloplasty. This had not been perfected enough to even be attempted. And here's another discrepancy. I'm seeing conflicting information. For example, in the Wikipedia page on phalloplasty, it quotes the following. First performed in 1946, phalloplasty is the construction or reconstruction of the penis, or the artificial modification of the penis by surgery. A complete construction or reconstruction of the penis can be performed on patients who have congenital anomalies such as micropenis, epispadias and hyperspadias, or who have lost their organ, or who are trans men who desire gender reassignment surgery as part of their gender transition. From another article on the official website of American Association for the Advancement of Science, AAAS, it says this. This new study takes penile construction a step further, showing that the nerves required for erectile function can be induced to grow through tissue engineering. Right now, we can do partial penile repair, but in order to do complete replacements, we need to make sure all the parts are there, including the nerves. So which is it? can they completely construct a penis or not? The article from AAAS was written in 2003, but that shouldn't make any difference if they were already performing and perfecting the phalloplasty in 1946. Remember earlier when I mentioned the doctor who performed the hand surgery on a patient who had died? Well, the attending doctors and medical examiner ruled the cause of death to be mesenteric ischemia, although there was no autopsy. Mesenteric ischemia is a rare, painful condition in which the blood supply to the small intestine slows or closes off. It sometimes creates a toxic sludge that fills the gut and spreads sepsis through the body. The disease, which generally arises from multiple factors, is notoriously difficult to diagnose. This connection is very strange indeed. The mesentery is also a Mandela effect, an organ that suddenly appeared out of nowhere. In January 2017, this article came out announcing to the world that a new organ had been discovered in 2012. There's that magic year again. I don't recall 2012 being such a busy year. Oh wait, I was too preoccupied with moving from Sagittarius to Orion. What I find weird about this one is, yes, the mesentery was always there. Well, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. That's the nature of ME, but I digress. So it was maybe always there, but they just didn't know it was a whole organ. It was always there, but as something else. And that affects what we know about it. How? So now we have a possible new field of mesenteric science. And isn't it strange that this came out in 2017, the same year the woman who had the hand transplant also died of mesenteric ischemia? I mean, was there a bloody great hole in that part of our body where we didn't understand the function of whatever was in there? Here's a quote from the article. An organ is considered to be a self-contained body part that serves a specific vital function. If the role of an organ is vital, what the bloody hell was this organ doing before for us not to understand it? The organ that shall not be named. I'm beginning to feel like I'm in a Harry Potter book. What on earth was this organ doing?